Welcome to Spoilerful Reviews, where we're going to be talking about story, gameplay, style, and time value of various video games. Today we're going to be talking about the onion of video games, or the second onion. Anyways, we're going to be talking about Layers of Fear 2 Boat Simulator. Okay, I don't know if that onion Shrek joke was actually kind of worth it. So Layers of Fear 2 is the follow-up to the original Layers of Fear, which are both developed by Bloober Team, released back in 2019. But where the original Layers of Fear was all about the art and very heavily influenced by the Haunted House Simulator PT, Layers of Fear 2 takes it in a bit of a different direction. This one's on a boat, while still incorporating all of the really cool creepy effects that were in the first game, except this time adding a fun couple of new twists. So now let's get into Layers of Fear 2. Oh, and spoiler warning, but I think at this point you kind of already knew that was coming. The story of Layers of Fear 2 is what pulls you in, because otherwise it's just kind of like walking through this really cool haunted boat. With lots of weird, creepy, recurring objects, a strong movie-related plot, and a director telling you what to do, it makes everything kind of unsettling, just to say the least. As the actor, you're supposed to be acting in some crazy film under some world-renowned director, who is known for running his actors under rigorous and kind of crazy training schedules. As you go on your way, the director can sometimes be heard yelling instructions at you for doing various things, and ultimately it's up to you whether or not you want to follow his direction or just kind of do what you want to do. However, while exploring, you start to discover the story of two kids, James and Lily. You find out that the two had escaped onto a similar ship to this one that you're on in order to escape their abusive father, who hated James because their mother died giving birth to him. But on the boat, things were pretty bad for the pair. From escaping guards to barely getting enough food, times were really tough for the two kids. Then through some pirate ship hallucination, you realize that you're actually playing as a grown-up version of James. And this ocean liner that you're on might just be a bunch of hallucinations that you're kind of seeing here. You do learn that while James and Lily were on this ship, the guards started becoming stricter on controlling their food rations, which eventually led to Lily getting mad at James and abandoning him for a bit on the ship alone. This really hurt James, and clearly affected his mental state because he started talking with rats, and actually got a small army of them together, or something along those lines. It's not really clear whether or not this was a hallucination or it actually happened in real life. Eventually they did reconcile, however their reunion is cut short. The boat was set on fire, and as the two children ran for a lifeboat, unfortunately James saw Lily die in a big explosion. And so once you figure out this whole story, then you get towards the end of the game, which basically there are a couple endings here: the flame, forever, and formless ending. Starting out with the flame ending, this is what happens if you do follow all of the director's directions throughout the game. Director's directions. Cool. It heavily implies that James basically just became another mannequin where he will form himself into some sort of character because he doesn't know who he is anymore. And this entire game that you play through was just him coming to terms with his past and understanding all of the trauma that kind of happened to him. The second ending, Forever, happens if you decide to every single time disobey what the director is telling you to do. This ending actually ends on a little bit of a turn where there's this woman looking into a mirror, and it implies that she's actually a method actor. And so the entire events of the game were just her preparing to enter into the mindset of the next character that she's playing. Whether or not it was James or Lily doesn't really matter. This also just implies that the entire story was just a work of fiction in your mind. Cool. And the last ending, called Formless, is what happens if you obey and also disobey the director, and so you kind of have like an inconsistent identity crisis. This ending is weird because it has this mysterious woman telling James that to get what he wants, he has to start over, and then you get sent back in time to chapter 1. This ending heavily implies that everything James saw on this boat was actually very real, and that there is some supernatural force here that is actually at work, which is kind of creepy. I'm not gonna lie, the story was very confusing to me, and I felt pretty lost until I had to look it up online and read about what was going on. It's incredibly abstract, and even though it's presented with the James and Lily and you kind of understand what's going on, it's not really clear how all the puzzle pieces kind of fit together. But it is presented in a way that is quite spooky, and so I think it does do the game justice. The storytelling part could just be a little bit less abstract to kind of help you along the way. So when talking about the gameplay of Layers of Fear 2, there actually isn't that much to talk about. You can still tell it was heavily inspired by both Amnesia and PT. It's kind of a haunted house simulator with a couple of simple, easy puzzles to solve along the way. One thing that I did appreciate is that they didn't overuse all of the same effects over and over and over again, because while it's creepy the first couple of times, when you kind of see them, you're like, this is kind of getting old here. I do admit, because it occupies this supernatural space, some of the puzzles were really cool in how they were designed to work. What comes to mind is basically there's a bunch of like still framed photos, and then you have to go through and find the one that has a door, because as you approach it, then it turns into an actual door, and then you can find a new hallway to walk down. I will say a couple of puzzles were confusing, and they do get kind of frustrating when you get kind of stuck on them. But this isn't too bad. You can just kind of look up a quick walkthrough, and then you can easily just breeze past them. And I do want to mention that it only was a couple of them where I was like, what the hell is going on? One other thing is the monster. All of the monster chases are actually quite exhilarating and fun. They struck the perfect balance by not making him too difficult, but you know that it can definitely kill you, so you start running as soon as he starts to show up. So the gameplay for Layers of Fear 2 isn't something very special. It's honestly very basic and pretty similar to other horror games. Like, all of these guys just kind of do the same things. It's just in this setting with all of this heavy atmosphere stuff, the gameplay works really well. And talking about style, this is where Layers of Fear 2 really shines. Being themed around movies is such a wonderful way for them to consistently change how the game looks and sounds, because it all depends on which act or which movie you're kind of in at the time. It's delightfully haunting, and the ship itself always seems to warp. Doors close themselves, rooms go to areas that didn't exist, walls appear where there weren't any before. It's so well done. Just to kind of break this down, Act 1 feels like you're kind of on this scary boat and it's all haunted and stuff like that. Act 2 makes you feel like you're going through a bunch of really old movie sets. Act 3 is this really warped, abstracted house that you're kind of exploring. Act 4 is literally like the creepiest thing ever because there's a lot of red and murder and all of that type of stuff. And then Act 5, you actually go back to the boat, except this time it's all old, eroded, and seems like it would have been like underwater for years. The style of each act is done so well, and it finds new ways to creep you out despite using some of the old same tactics, like moving mannequins or the monster that's going to chase you. It's all very well done. Plus, the whole theme around the movies, including the monster, the director, and all of these different hallucinations, it all just contributes to this really fantastic horror atmosphere that most games just don't really nail. Of note, the effect where the mannequins are almost being rendered at a different frame rate to make them look so out of place kind of sent shivers down my spine. And I also like this too because this is a similar effect that they used in the movie Into the Spider-Verse for Miles. Fun fact, it's great. Another really cool thing about the style of this game is the hub world, or like the room you keep on returning to after each of these different acts. It's always changing based on where you are in the game. This just, to me, really showed how much attention was given to the aesthetic and the atmosphere in Layers of Fear 2, and it's worth it. It's so good. So huge props to Bloober Team, because you can tell how much work really went into building specifically the style of this game. And in my opinion, I think it really paid off, and this is the main selling point of Layers of Fear 2. So if we're talking about the time value of Layers of Fear 2, well, currently right now this game is available on every single platform except for the Nintendo Switch. Right now on Steam it is $39.99, Epic Games Store is $32.99, the Xbox Store for $38.99, and the PlayStation Store for $29.99. It took me around 5 hours to get through the game once, but I got nowhere near unlocking everything and also even unlocking all the different endings. That 5-hour time does not include all of that extra stuff in there. So I'm really conflicted about this because I think this is genuinely one of my favorite experiences playing a horror game in a really, really, really long time. But I think that the cost is still a little high. If you see the game go on sale for around $15, I would highly recommend it because I think it's just interesting being able to experience everything just all for yourself. No Let's Play is going to really emulate that whole experience of playing through this game. And that's going to wrap up this spoilerful review. I hope you enjoyed hearing me talk to you about Layers of Fear 2. I really enjoyed this one, and especially if you're in the mood for like a nice horror game, then I cannot stress how good this game is. Unfortunately, Metacritic doesn't really agree with me because they only gave it like a 70%. So if you've played it, then let me know what you think down in the comments below, whether you agree or you disagree. As always, you can watch me play these games live on Twitch, but until the next one, I'll catch you next time for another spoilerful review. I'll see you guys then.